My name is Paul Williams. I'm the Technical Partnership Manager for Procurement for Housing. I think we've got a really interesting webinar this morning. It's one of a series that we run throughout the year. And I'm joined today by Antoine from HACT, who I will introduce shortly. So just a couple of traditional items to cover off. In terms of this webinar, obviously this has been run in conjunction with HACT. We are, as Procurement for Housing, a member of HACT, and we felt that this was an opportunity to bring this particular subject to greater attention within the sector and our sort of network of contacts. I think there's a particular potential for this, and Antoine's going to go into a lot more detail about the offer. There is an opportunity to ask questions. If you could put any questions that you have in the Q&A function within the Zoom software, that would be much appreciated. We are recording this webinar, and that will be made available on our YouTube channel later on. The slide deck will also be made available to people who have attended. And without further ado, I should introduce Antoine. So Antoine is the Customer Relationship Lead at HACT and has been specifically working on this retrofit credits initiative for some time. He has a bachelor and a master's degree in the environmental field and has been working with the social housing sector for the past 3 years. Before that, he's worked around the world in various countries, developing his experience and actually still holds British and French nationality. Antoine has been involved with this particular project since its inception and continues to support its growth as a programme and play a key role in its development. The way forward for this is obviously that we want to take it out to the membership of the social housing world, but also actually making sure that this is considered as part of the programme of tackling the environmental and carbon reduction measures that we are seeing as a priority for the housing sector at the current time. Antoine, over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Hopefully nobody will hold my French nationality against me this morning. Certainly not when England and France play each other at the rugby later this month. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm extremely happy to be able to share our latest project at HACT, Retrofit Credits. Due to some technical difficulties, I'm going to bring back the famous next slide, please, which Paul will do for me. So thanks, Paul, for that. So without further ado, Retrofit Credits is basically a carbon crediting scheme that unlocks additional funding by verifying the emission reduction as well as social value of retrofit projects to aid fund those projects, enhance them and bring them sooner than they would be, but also help with future net zero goals. So we'll go on to our next slide, if I may. So what is it and what does it do? Retrofit credits are a way of providers to access the significant pool of capital that organizations, businesses and corporates are investing in carbon reduction projects. So as part of their decarbonization plans, organizations from across the economy invest in emission reduction projects, both within and outside of their own supply chain. Currently, this investment is focused on activities such as reforestation and renewable energy. And this is something a little bit different and new. So Retrofit Credits introduces a way of these organizations to channel some of their investment into housing retrofit and support the social values that retrofit activities benefit residents and the residents of those homes as well. Retrofit credits or retrofit is expected to cost the social housing sector over £100 billion, and those calculations were made back in before the cost of living crisis as well. And retrofit credits could be an essential part of the funding mix, enabling retrofit to happen more widely and, as I said earlier, than it would otherwise be the case. As you can see there, organizations have spent in 2021, or UK businesses, shall we say, £14.9 million or have funded for 14.9 million tons of emissions by investing in their projects. We'll go to the next slide, if I may. So what makes it different? Well, retrofit projects is a housing retrofit, and housing retrofit has the most impactful, ways to address climate change, bringing positive health, well-being, and financial impact to residents. And that's why social impact is at the heart of retrofit credit service. We use the UK Social Value Bank, as many will know, which demonstrates how retrofit reduces emissions and creates social value for residents and their communities. And we look at expanding our understanding of this part of the credit as well during the pilot and the next subsequent years. So we'd very much like to hear about volunteer organizations who'd like to be involved in helping us to develop that part of the retrofit credit social value measures. Retrofit projects or the retrofit credits is only the second accredited project in the UK by the Vero Registry. The Vero Registry is the preeminent carbon emitting organization in the world, and under the verified carbon standard. And we're very happy to say that we're actually the first project to be recognized to measure carbon emission reductions in the built environment anywhere in the world, which is pretty incredible. So what we're bringing is a mechanism to be able to invest in local communities in the UK and at high integrity and excellent quality of credits. Next slide, please. So I think we're one ahead, Paul. Yeah, thanks very much. So the key talking points. Providers enroll their homes where retrofit works could improve not only the thermal efficiency, but also reduce the carbon intensity of their heating systems. The service quantifies the environmental benefits of the retrofit projects using the verified carbon standard, and the service also quantifies the social benefit of those retrofit projects using the social value bank. The program will originate internationally recognized credits backed by the emission reduction achieved from those retrofit projects and match these to enrolled buyers. This begins with long-term income stream for the providers, which retrofit works complete being eligible for a period of up to 20 years. So if you complete your projects this year, we'd be able to sell those credits until 2042 at the end of the project. We'll be working with providers to establish an ethical framework so that we get the right types of buyers who would feel comfortable investing in their projects. This means that the housing providers can be confident that they're working with trusted partners who are making meaningful steps towards their own decarbonization and supporting local communities and their residents. At scale, we're looking to be able to match buyers with operations within a very tight local community and within a tight circle, so that in time, local businesses can show that they're supporting their local economies by purchasing those carbon credits for the retrofit in their neighborhoods. And this is where we try and facilitate long-term relationships with those providers and the buyers. Go to the next slide. So to give you some project updates. So since the launch of retrofit credits, the pilot in September 2022, HACT and Arctic partners, who are our partners in the program, who do most of the measurements and quantifying of the carbon emission reductions, we've enrolled, or we've spoken to 156 social housing providers across the sector and 25 suppliers within the private sector as well. We've originated 90 letters of intent, signed or issued. We're waiting for some of them to come back still, and getting more and more on board as we speak. And we've been in contact with 35 potential buyers, of which we've already agreed pre-sales for the first cycle of crediting, which is actually happening as we speak. We've also had communication with over 60 promoters who support our project and encourage for the opportunities to happen, as we are here with PfH, of course. Next slide, please. So this is to give you an overview of what would happen for the project. So initially, as step one, you would sign a letter of intent, which on the buyer's side or the provider side. Then as a provider, you would give us the data of your stock that you have retrofitted or planning to retrofit in the future. We will do the heavy lifting as such, where we will do the quantifying, the calculation in the background, and see what your projects could generate in time. Secondly, we do, as I said, we do all of those calculations. Once the projects are completed, the providers send us documentation as proof of the project completing, and that normally past 2035 if the work is undertaken under SHDF, but it can also be registry of a competent work scheme, whether it's gas registry certificate or electricity certificate, etc. Then once we have all of that, we internally do our calculations, and we employ a auditor, independent auditor, provided or from a list provided by Vera Registry. And then once that's completed, we send it to Vera to originate the credits, which means that we can sell them and payments come back, and we provide the payments back to the organization to be able to fund subsequent retrofit works. Next slide, please. So to give you an example, a background example of what it could mean to an organization. We've had one housing association send us the data on a project of 70 homes. We're very happy to say that those 70 homes, we are completely agnostic to the type of home where the retrofit measures are undertaken, and we're pretty much completely open to the type of retrofit it happens, as long as we can verify or measure the carbon emission reduction. The only thing that we can't credit for is any solar panels that are attached to the grid where more than 50% of the energy provided or created by those solar panels are sold back to the energy companies. That's the only reason why we wouldn't be able to credit. But for this project, on these 70 homes that they have had retrofitted, there's a multitude of different measures, such as loft insulation, interior wall insulation, exterior wall insulation, electrification of the home by putting in air source heat pumps, etc., etc. And that resulted in our calculations that we do with 115 ton of carbon emission reduction, which equates to 115 credits. Those 115 credits, we project having a sale of those retrofit credits over the next 21 years, because the work happened in 2022 to 2042, to generate an income of 250 or around £250,000 over that period. And those payments are made on a yearly basis once those 115 credits are sold up to 2042. So that's the general idea of the project, and it's a bit short and sweet, but it leaves plenty of time for anybody to ask for any specific questions about it, and I'll be very happy to share them or to answer them for you.
Okay, thank you, Antoine. I'll just, can everybody now see the normal screen? Okay, so there are no questions in the Q&A just yet, so I'll give people time.
Oh, you've muted yourself, Paul, I think.
There you go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry. So I can't see any questions in the Q&A just yet, so I will just ask a couple of questions that I have, if that's okay. I think one of the things that struck me really is about the quality and the data verification. I think that's what differentiates this scheme compared to others, and in terms of making sure the integrity is right, which is obviously such a critical issue for the sector. So I think that's something that definitely needs to be fully understood and identified as being a differentiator, and I think quite important that we can take that forward. In terms of just a couple of questions that I had, in terms of what the criteria are for the buyers to actually enter into this program, if there is a particular criteria.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So as I mentioned very quickly during the presentation, we're creating, because it's a pilot, we're in the process of creating an ethical framework for buyers to adhere to. So basically, that will mean that as we have been involved in the sector for more than 60 years as HACT, we want this project to be as high integrity as possible. So we wouldn't accept any buyers that were looking to greenwash, for example. So that means that buyers or organizations that don't have their own decarbonization strategy and can see that they are actually looking to lower their own unabated carbon emissions. We completely understand that many organizations won't be able to go to net zero completely, because they still will be, I don't know, running cars around if it's a supplier, sending workers. And so we're just looking to add to that. So as long as they have a decarbonization strategy, also any organizations that are super polluters, for example, any organizations that may be associated with nefarious types of businesses, such as maybe tobacco, arms, manufacturing, that kind of thing. Of course, they'll have to adhere to many other parts, but that's what we're trying to create, something where you have a very high standard of ethics, shall we say.
Okay, thank you. Just it links to one of my questions actually, but Adam has come up with a question in terms of the SHDF and does using grant funding have an impact on access to the credits? And I think that's sort of that wider piece about whether this can be used in combination with other funding streams is quite critical.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, so different funding schemes have different rules. So BEIS have put in a rule for SHDF that they do not accept any other funding for the SHDF part of the grant. So SHDF, in essence, provides 50% of grant. It's actually a little bit less in real terms when we've seen the data come in, but let's say it's 50%. We won't be able to credit against the 50% that is funded by SHDF, but we'll be able to credit against the other 50%. We've checked that with BEIS. They're very happy and actually welcome the project highly. So so for SHDF, it's basically the match funding part that we can credit against. So if it's, for example, 57.6%, then we'll fund or we'll be able to credit against 57.6% of the project. Other projects such as Eco4, which are funded by the energy companies, or LAD, or any other green loan or sustainable linked finance, we can completely credit against, as long as it's not written specifically in the rules that we can't. So for these types of things, yeah, we can credit 100%.
Okay, I think that's interesting because certainly SHDF's a couple of people talking to about what their bids have been. They're talking that actually their contribution, or the BEIS contribution, is actually much less than 50%. It's more like 20% in some cases.
Oh, wow.
So that gives quite a lot of headroom to actually assist with this particular project and that type of funding. So.
Yeah, and it's an easy calculation for us, because we only ever credit for completed works, which is another major benefit that you mentioned, high integrity, but also it's real. unlike some reforestation maybe or energy, which are looking at carbon savings in the future. These are carbon savings that happen instantly. As soon as the project is done, that's where the carbon savings are happening from day one onwards. So we only credit against completed works, which basically means that we'll know exactly at the end of the project what that percentage is. So if SHGF is only 20%, then absolutely we can credit against the other 80.
Okay. Another question from Jonathan Newton. How would selling carbon affect carbon emissions reporting? So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got some information that I'll be able to share as well with the slides, Paul, that you can send to all your members. Yeah, so unless you are reporting against your scope 1, 2, and 3, which 3 being your supply chain, which means the homes that organizations own, unless you're reporting against scope 3, it won't affect it at all. So if you're only reporting for your corporate emissions, then it doesn't affect it. If it's scope 3, then there are guidance to be able to help with that, which basically means that in your statement, you'll have a gross amount of saving, which will incorporate all of your savings that you're doing, including the retrofit works. And then secondary, you'll have a net statement, where you'll be able to say that you've sold off certain amounts of credits to be able to fund for more retrofit works. And that will be clear in your statement. But as I say, it's only in your scope 3, and most, at least from what we found, most organizations don't yet report against their scope 3. Saying that though, in the future, the project goes on to 2042. There is a complete flexibility in terms of selling the credits. So you can decide, or an organization can decide which, the year that they want to sell the credit. So it may be that an organization has decided to go to full net zero in 2038, let's say. Well, the organization will be able to sell all of the credits up to 2038, then retire those credits, and then go to full net zero if they wanted at that time. Even if it's earlier, they can decide. So the credits are decided on a yearly basis. So there's a lot of flexibility with the project.
Yeah, okay, that's great, thank you. But then Lecky's got a question about the income stream being paid over 20 years, and will it be the same company making those payments over that term, or will it be passed to different organizations during that term?
We'd love it if it was the same over 20 years, because that would mean that we had a guaranteed buyer. Unfortunately, at the moment, the buyers are looking between 3 and 5 years commitment. One is looking at particularly at 10 years. We haven't spoken to any sort of buyers that are looking that far ahead. But yeah, hopefully we can get some buyers over the long term. But yeah, otherwise, if a buyer is looking, if an organization has got let's say a goal to set that they're going to be themselves net zero by 2035 or beyond, let's say, then we would find other buyers at that time to take over the credits that they were buying.
Okay. And the last question is on the Q&A at the current time. So if anybody does have any more, then fire them in very quickly, please. But again, from Adam saying, what's the cost side? Does the accreditation have a direct cost? Are there restrictions that come along with the long-term commitment?
No, so the cost, there is no cost to organizations to sell their credits. The cost comes from the buyer side. To be completely transparent, HACT Arctica or Retrofit Credit takes a 10% fee from the sale of the credit to be able to run the credit, to be able to do the measurements, the monitoring, the calculation, and then go through the crediting cycle. So basically, from 100% of the credit sale, organizations will be able to get 90% of that generated revenue.
Okay, but from a client side, it's actually
actually taken from the purchasers. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So no, there is no cost attached.
Okay. Another question from Jonathan. Is there a minimum level of scale necessary to qualify or make this worthwhile?
No, there isn't. We're very happy to say that we can work with whichever organization. So we're looking to work with smalls that do amazing work in very local areas, as well as most of the G15, let's say, that are on board the project. We've got one that has basically in Scotland that has done that's using the project to do work on 3 cottages on an island off the coast of Scotland, where without the funding they may not be able to do it, but knowing that there is projected funding for the future, they can actually make a case to be able to retrofit these old and needed cottages. So yeah, no, there is no limit or scale that's necessary to get involved.
I think that's the benefit of it being, it's literally on a carbon saving basis, isn't it? It's however much you save, the more you get. So obviously there is more benefit if you can achieve more and you have more properties, but actually the smaller landlord is not in any way disadvantaged.
No, exactly.
They get the same credit as everybody else would.
Exactly.
So, okay, I think that's all the questions we have. As I said earlier, the slides will be available. This will appear on our YouTube channel in the not too distant future. If I can ask that when the recording stops, there will be a very short, I think it's 2 or 3 questions, questionnaire come up just about your future involvement, your takeaways from this webinar. If you would be kind enough to stay on and just complete that, we would really appreciate it. Other than that, thank you very much, Antoine. It's been really appreciated. I think it's a fascinating subject, and I think there's a real benefit to the sector from going down this route. I can't see any negatives, to be absolutely honest.
No. No, they've been. I've had, as you can imagine, I've had quite a few conversations, and often it's like, oh, what's the catch, or where's I guess the catch would be you have to do the work initially. And then we can credit against it. The beauty of the project as well, if I may just add a couple of other notes, is that you can make it incremental as well. So you can have the same home. If many organizations have got planned retrofit over the next few years. So if they have, let's say, a fabric first, which is kind of the general idea, on certain homes, and then in a couple of years they've got electrification, for example, well, you can add increased amount of retrofit to the same home over time, as long as it reduces the carbon emission of that home every time you do the work. Then we can look at crediting against that as well. And one of the major pluses is the locality of the project. Being one in the UK and supporting UK social housing and private housing, but really pushing the decarbonisation of those homes and helping towards that in the UK, and for UK organisations to be able to support that as well.
Yeah, no, I think the leadership that HACT have shown in this regard in developing this project is really admirable. It's taking the sector to a place where it needs someone to lead that conversation and see the opportunity. So no, I think it's fantastic. So yes, thank you very much. I shall leave it there, but that questionnaire will be popping up shortly, and we shall see you on our next webinar. Thanks very much.
Take care.